Okay, hello and welcome to Community Conversations with Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform. My name is Jacqueline Blocker. Despite the fact that it says Chris Steele below me, I am Jacqueline Blocker, the Engagement Director for Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform. Thank you for joining us today for our weekly webinar. We are today very happy to spend the hour discussing and sharing resources for survivors and victims of domestic violence. There are a lot of organizations in the state that work tirelessly in this effort, and we are fortunate to have two of those organizations represented today to share information about their resources and how they've adjusted in this COVID life. So we have, fortunately, Divis of Tulsa with us, and then the YWCA of Oklahoma City. Before I get to introducing our wonderful panelists, I want to introduce the other staff members of OCJR. We have Chris Steele, the actual Chris Steele, from the Executive Director for Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform, who waved everybody. And we also have Callie Watkins, who is our reentry coordinator and works with Project Commutation. And Elizabeth Mashburn is our office administrator with OCJR. So I just wanted you all to be able to meet our team there. So without further ado, let's get to the stars of the day. And thank you all so much for your time to be with us. It's such an important conversation to be had. First, Tracy Lyle is the Executive Director for DIVIS, Domestic Violence Intervention Services in Tulsa. And I will just let Tracy take it away, tell a little bit about herself, and talk about the amazing work that DIVIS is doing. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And thank you for having us today. It's a pleasure to be here, and as you know, such an important time for us to just talk about the services that are available in our state all the time, but especially during the pandemic. And I think all of us are concerned about families who might be unsafe during this time, knowing that we've been under some stay-at-home orders and that stress and tension is high. And so this, I think, is an important conversation to be having today. I am the CEO of DIVIS. I've been with DIVIS for about 13 years, actually on May 1st. And sort of my third time to be at DIVIS. So have a long history of just passion for the type of work that we do for victims in our community. I thought I just might talk a little bit about DIVIS's services and what we provide, not only during COVID, but just every day. And so I think one of the sort of misconceptions that we've been concerned about is that people who might need our help or who are unsafe during this time may believe, or erroneously, that we're not available to help during this time. So knowing that if you're in an unsafe situation, that the abusive person often will say, well, you know, nobody's there to help you, and they're not going to be available to help you. We're in a pandemic. So I think that's one of the things that has concerned us during this time, and want to just say that we are here to help, and our usual services that we provide are still in place. And they may just look and feel a little bit different during this time because we're all, we have been at least sheltering in place and working remotely as much as possible, and adhering to social distancing when that has been asked of us. So I thought I might start by just saying that right now, one of the ways that people can reach out to us is through our crisis line. And that's an information and or crisis line that's available 24 hours a day for anybody who is unsafe or concerned about someone who's unsafe. So we have advocates who can answer calls, begin conversations about how to leave a dangerous situation, to safety plan, and look at options that are available to families as they begin to navigate or think about navigating to some safer spaces during this time. So that continues to be available 24 hours a day, along with our emergency shelter. And again, that may look a little bit different because we have been trying to maintain social distancing, yet still be available for safety if people need it. So during this time, one of the ways that we've done that, in addition to our shelter, is hotel rooms and sheltering people in hotel rooms in the community and providing services to them in the hotel rooms in terms of meals and safety planning and case management and those sort of things during this time. So those are still available and are important particularly for people who don't have any other place to go or a safe place to stay during this time. In terms of just case management or even counseling or crisis support, certainly we offer as a normal part of our business, counseling for adult survivors of domestic violence. And so we're still providing support and counseling via telehealth for those that need that type of support, particularly those who were already clients during or when we sort of left the workplace and went into stay-at-home sort of mode. So those services are still available as well for people who might need to touch base with a counselor or whose kids might have been in our services prior to the pandemic and receiving counseling services. Those families, those same resources are still available during this time. So let's see, in terms of legal support, we continue to work with people who need protective orders during this time. But again, that is one of those programs that looks a little bit different than it might have prior to the pandemic, which is right now the best way to access a protective order is to involve law enforcement. They are 24 hours a day available to issue protective orders during that time. So they will then connect the victim of violence to an advocate for further safety planning, case management, and so forth. So we've seen those protective orders numbers or requests for protective orders drop during this time. My guess is that is because they're primarily being issued through calls with law enforcement, and for some people it's just not safe for them to reach out in that manner. So we have seen some decline in those requests. However, our advocates are still available to talk with people about their options and protective orders during this time. So if a person does not want to call law enforcement, they can certainly call our crisis line and speak with an advocate. So that gives you just a little bit of an overview of some of the main services of DIVIS, particularly during this time that we really want families to know about because of the stresses and strains of everything right now, or everyone in our community. And I'm happy to maybe field questions about those services or anything along those lines if I can.
Thank you so much, Tracy. That was a great overview. And that's the most important message that we do want to get out, is that services are still out here and available for those that are trying to unravel themselves from the cycle of domestic violence. And I failed to say at the top of the webinar for all of our attendees, please do not hesitate to submit questions and answers, and we will make sure that we try to get all of those answered as we can throughout the webinar. And we will have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar as well. So thank you so much, Tracy, for that overview. And we are going to move on to Angela Beatty of the YWCA out of Oklahoma City. Angela is the Senior Director of Domestic Violence Victim Services. So Angela, if you want to give a quick overview, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having us. We're excited to be able to be a part of this with you today. There is lots of overlap between criminal justice reform and domestic violence issues. And so I'm excited that we get the opportunity to talk about kind of those issues today. So yeah, I am the Senior Director of Domestic Violence Victim Services at the YWCA. So really long title, but basically that means that I get the privilege of supervising all of our agencies' domestic violence and residential programs. And so, like Divis in Oklahoma City, we're the primary provider of DV services. We have the only emergency shelter. I think that is probably what we're most well known for, is our emergency shelter. And so we are still open and providing services to clients. Our emergency shelter has 120 beds. We are being very creative in the way that we provide services right now. In shelter, we are still operating our hotlines 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but we are definitely working on doing things like social distancing. And so things look a little different now than they did previously, but we're still providing that immediate crisis intervention services. Our case advocates are still working with clients every day, helping them to reach, self-sufficiency and efficacy. So we're still though providing those services. We, let's see, as far as community services, we have a team of advocates that's housed at the Palomar Family Justice Center. I think I have about 12 staff there full time now. And so our advocates are there providing case management, crisis intervention, helping clients with protective orders. They are there to safety plan with clients. And so one of the big ways that people access our services now is through that Family Justice Center. And so if anyone wants to, they can call, they can text, there are lots of different ways that you can communicate to our staff through the Family Justice Center. And so you just have to let a navigator know that you want to speak to a trained advocate, and then those services can be available to you. So we're providing short-term crisis intervention. We're also assisting with criminal cases and civil cases and things like that. A lot of that has slowed down now since the pandemic. And so most criminal cases we're seeing are getting pushed. Even most civil cases are being pushed. We are still helping with protective orders, and they're doing emergency hearings, but then the final protective order hearings are taking place. Most of them are being set out until June or further. So we are still doing that immediate protective order assistance, but the longer protective orders are having to wait. We also have a couple of field advocates that provide services in the Family Justice Center, but also in other locations. So for community partners who are providing services, if you're at North Care, or if you're at, we've done groups in places like Jordan's Crossing and Remerge. And so those kinds of diversion programs, we actually have field advocates that will go and do groups there on site, or we'll go meet with clients in those other service agencies. And so if people have a client that you think maybe is experiencing domestic violence, maybe their abuser only lets them come to counseling at the other agency, then we have advocates that can go meet with them there as well. We do also have, much like Divis, a court program called the Domestic Violence Victims Assistance Program. And so we work very closely with the Oklahoma City Police Department, getting referrals from them. And then we also provide advocacy at almost all the VPO court hearings in Oklahoma County. And so, there are thousands of VPOs filed a year. Even though we help write hundreds of them, we don't write them all, obviously. And so we have a team of advocates, volunteers, and interns that actually provide advocacy at all of those court hearings. And so we're there to be able to offer assistance, let them know about the YWCA, about services like legal aid and Palomar and all of those different agencies that they can get help in. And so we're still providing some of that assistance. And then we do also have economic empowerment programs, so programs to help people with their resumes and with job searching. We're doing a lot of that over tele-advocacy now, and so we're still able to remotely help with resumes, help connect people to businesses that are still open, and things like that. But a little bit of that does look a little different now. We do have counseling services as well for adults and children. We do trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, and so we're able to provide that to adults and kiddos. We have trauma groups. I should say that all of our groups have been put on pause currently due to COVID. We are looking at exploring ways to do that safely, but there are lots of concerns as it relates to that. Someone may think that they're safe to do that, but their abuser may have access to their phone. We've also run into challenges, where if abuser hears something that's said in the group, that may present a safety concern for a client. So currently our groups are on pause, but we're still providing that one-on-one advocacy. We do also provide forensic exams for Oklahoma County. And so if anyone has been sexually assaulted and wants a forensic exam within 5 days of the assault, then we provide those exams. And then we also provide domestic violence nurse exams. And so someone can access a domestic violence exam, regardless of if they decide they want to prosecute or not. If they just want to catalog the injuries and get medical attention, meet with a trained nurse, an advocate to kind of get assistance and then catalog those injuries, then we have the ability to do that as well. And all someone would have to do to reach out to that is either contact us on our hotline, through the main office, or through the Palomar location as well. And I think that's kind of a general overview of our services. And I'm happy to answer any questions at the end as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that overview, Angela. And I know that there's going to be questions that come in, so I think it's good to have an overview at the beginning, and then we can start drilling down and having the conversation answer some of those questions. So thank you so much for that. Next, I'm going to kick it over to Molly Bryant, the Outreach Coordinator at Divis. Oh, hi, Brandon. The Outreach Coordinator for Divis. And Molly, if you would go ahead and take the lead.
Sure. So hi, I'm Molly Bryant. I use she, her, hers. I am actually our underserved outreach advocate at DVIS. So I am a licensed master social worker who focuses on populations that were historically left out of the mainstream domestic violence movement. So my role is to provide outreach, to do a lot of internal training and provide support for our staff, to do individual advocacy with survivors, and then a lot of systemic advocacy out in the community, and other forms of support for survivors in our community. I work with any survivor, but particularly I focus on the LGBTQ community, the deaf and hard of hearing community, rural residents, people who are incarcerated, and then immigrants or people with limited English proficiency. I just feel like I'm the luckiest. I get to work with like the most resilient, creative, coolest clients ever. I know a lot of us feel like that, but my clients, I feel like, have been really integral in leading us toward a direction of a full anti-oppression framework at Divis. Anti-oppression, or a lot of people, equity and inclusion, diversity, equity, inclusion, however you want to talk about it. So I don't have a lot more to add around services. I do want to add in a couple things around Divis services, and then I want to talk a little bit about our framework at Divis, just so you all know kind of where we're coming from whenever we are delivering our services. A couple other things that we are still, like Angela and Tracy did mention, we are having to get really creative with our services. So we're still providing them. They may look a little bit different. We do also offer sexual assault services. So like Angela mentioned, we also have hospital advocacy around sexual assault exams in Tulsa County. So if you, so we have hospital advocates 24/7. So anyone who wants an advocate who needs a SANE exam can call our crisis line and get someone there with them at any point. We also have trained counselors who are there to work in our sexual assault department. It doesn't matter when the sexual assault happened, if it was yesterday or 25 years ago, we will work with you. It really doesn't matter. We also have I think it's a wonderful outreach and education department. We have outreach counselors who are at a lot of the college campuses, so at all of the Tulsa Community College campuses, which obviously that looks super different right now, right? At Tulsa Community College, at TU, obviously they're not on campus right now. And then we also have people who are embedded at Tulsa Public Schools who are doing some really cool programming for teenagers. There's a really cool program called Coaching Boys into Men, where one of our, like this very cool football player who was well known at TU is now leading programming for a lot of other athletic programs in Tulsa, and he gets all this kind of respect from the teams that I never could. And it's just really neat to see, but it's all about like reducing toxic masculinity and teaching respect. And so we've got a lot of other programs. Divis and YWCA OKC we're huge, so we've got tons of programs, and it's hard to remember all of them sometimes, I feel like. Yeah. But just quickly, kind of around our anti-oppression framework, what it means whenever I say anti-oppression framework, it really means that we are working really diligently, and I will say we have not arrived at this place, and we will never arrive at this place, but we are working really diligently to center the most impacted survivors of domestic violence in our work. So when we are creating a new strategic plan, for example, my clients, like my Central American clients in the Tulsa County Jail, who are survivors, who are undocumented, who are awaiting deportation, who have been caught up in anti-immigrant programs like 287G, who have stories of mistreatment by all kinds of officials and systems, their stories get uplifted at the table during board meetings. Like their voices are brought to the forefront whenever we're creating these strategies. So our board of directors gets to hear that. And that's pretty unheard of. And it's really neat, to say the least. So yeah, they get to hear those experiences, and it's not just the stories that we've been telling forever of that perfect victim, and I say that in quotes on purpose, or the very relatable middle class white mother who did everything right. We're telling the stories of survivors that we actually serve, and that deserve as much dignity and respect as everyone else. So of course, we're really excited about the work we're doing. We think anti-oppression, equity, inclusion work within domestic violence means working to end domestic violence in the community, or end violence in the community as well. So super excited to be on this call, because the more we get in, we believe that we need to be more involved in conversations around criminal justice reform and immigration and all these other topics, because they all intersect. Our clients don't, our work isn't in a vacuum. Our clients don't leave the building and suddenly not experience racism and classism and this sexism, right? So we understand that child abuse is connected to domestic violence. So is the preschool to prison pipeline, and the gender wage gap, and teen pregnancy, and racism, and incarceration. So that's kind of the lens at which we're really trying to do this work. And so I think it very much connects to the work you all are doing. And I think obviously the work we do is really heavy. We're also, I will say, I think it's tough to do this work, and I'm sure a lot of us have been to conferences other places. It's tough to do this work anywhere. It's really tough to do this work in Oklahoma. We don't have the best track record in Oklahoma when it comes to trauma or learning our lessons very quickly, but it's forums like this where we get to educate the community and hear from the community and offer information about services even during a global pandemic that really get me excited about kind of pushing the needle, moving the needle forward. So that's my spiel. So thank you.
Thank you, Molly. That was so well said, and thank you so much for your work, because it is a lot, and but people that have the passion that you do is what makes it keep pushing forward. So thank you to all of you. Brandon Paisley of the YWCA Oklahoma City joined us, and Brandon is the Senior Director of Specialized Training for the YWCA in Oklahoma City. So Brandon, I will turn it over to you if you would tell everyone a little bit about yourself and about what you do with the YWCA.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. And I apologize for coming on late. I had some surprise technology issues. You'd think I'd have this Zoom stuff down by now.
No worries. Every day I get nervous. I get nervous every time, so no worries. Thank you. We're happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. So yeah, I currently serve as the Senior Director of Specialized Training at YWCA in Oklahoma City. I work with our Social and Economic Justice program as well as our QA department. And on my own, I spend a lot of time providing training and overseeing training efforts. But I'm here today to talk a little bit about the intersection of domestic violence work and child welfare. And I'm really thrilled at the opportunity to talk with you all about it in just a couple of sound bites. But a lot of really important work has gone into transforming that landscape where domestic violence meets child welfare. And anybody in the domestic violence field who was around prior to 2011 can probably tell you that many times our professional relationships were often contentious between child welfare and domestic violence advocates. And a lot of that was because of miscommunication, and quite frankly, a lot of it was because of poor policy or poor communication about policy. So in 2011, Department of Human Services Child Welfare, which I'm now training myself to say Oklahoma Human Services rather than DHS, that's what they're going by now. It's just kind of hard to unlearn that habit. But they identified some real issues in that arena, and domestic violence advocates across the state, through the Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. The Y was involved, DIVIS was at the table in 2011. And so basically we sat down together and looked at policies, methods, and conversations to have in order to strengthen policies around domestic violence response, to enhance intervention and safety strategies for victims, children, and batterers. And so we actually have had 3 versions of this great desk reference guide that have been published. If you're interested, you can actually get a copy of this free from DHS. It's the publication number 12-36, and I can email that to Jacqueline if anybody is interested. But you can get a copy of it. This is a great resource. It's called the Domestic Violence Manual for Child Welfare Professionals. I'm still not sure how I feel about the fact that a number of people have begun to refer to it as the Domestic Violence Bible in child welfare. Kind of counterintuitive, but it actually is a great resource. The main thing that this book does is focuses the efforts of that committee, which is now known as the Oklahoma DHS Child Welfare Domestic Violence Statewide Collaborative. Say that 3 times fast. Was formed in an effort to keep the momentum going that was created in 2011. And so this committee has committed to continuing that work and to get a condensed version of those strengthened policies, those intervention strategies, those safety strategies, a basic dictionary of definitions for domestic violence related terms into the hands of workers. And so they agreed upon core principles between the domestic violence community and the child welfare community in terms of what is the most important at this intersection. And so it says in a number of different ways in this manual that in most cases, the preferred way to protect children and build protective capacities is to partner with the adult victim in safety planning and to hold the abusive partner accountable throughout the systems. And that became a really important highlight, because what we saw through a number of documents through the Post-Adjudication Review Board and a number of other service plans for victims is that we would have, to-dos stacked on service plans for the victim and virtually nothing for the offender, the batterer, to complete in order to keep this child safe. And so really working to create some balance in that strategy. And again, partnering with, in terms of safety planning, to partner with the victim. In addition to the amazing guidance that this tool, which again is in its 3rd publication, DHS also mandates, or Oklahoma Human Services, as we must call them now, mandates specific domestic violence training for all child welfare specialists before they even get a caseload. There are two of us that teach that course now, both of us domestic violence professionals. It's a 2-day training that all child welfare specialists have to go to, where they learn about the causes and dynamics of domestic violence, lethality, lethality assessment, safety planning around lethality, coercion and control, the effects on children, all of the things that really we felt like the field was missing around domestic violence for a number of years. And also, they've mandated a leadership training within child welfare. So not only do the frontline workers and specialists get that training, but we have a special leadership training that we offer twice a year for district directors and supervisors and even mentors. And so all across the board within child welfare, they're getting training, again, on those things, the causes and dynamics of domestic violence, best practices, safety planning, lethality, all of the things that those workers need to know, how to assess change with a batterer. Is a batterer just complying with the service plan, or are we seeing real behavior change? And one of the best outcomes of this team is a series of smaller teams. It's not just the statewide collaborative, but a local collaborative as well. DIVIS was actually the first one in Tulsa County that created this smaller collaborative team made up of the child welfare community and the domestic violence specialists and professionals in the Tulsa community. And they actually get together and staff these cases, sort of like an MDT, a multidisciplinary team, or a CCRT, a coordinated community response team. So all of the players that have a vested interest in these families are at the same table, they get the proper releases, and they're able to move forward, having a lot more collaborative information. We're all on the same side these days in a way that we really weren't before. So I think we've made some tremendous strides in the last 9-10 years. And so that's just a little bit about some of the core principles that we've developed. If you want to know more, you can certainly email me. I'll be available to answer any questions, but I can't recommend this manual enough. Even if you aren't a child welfare specialist or professional, there's a lot of great information for all of us across the board here. Thank you. Thanks, Jacqueline.
Thank you so much for that overview, Brandon, and thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate that. So just a few questions. Thank you, everyone. You did such a great overview of everything. First question would be, I know you all have mentioned how everyone's gotten creative with dealing with the COVID. Can you maybe give a little more detail about how perhaps if a family member is concerned about a loved one during this time, what might be the best way to go about starting that process out of an abundance of concern for their safety in these situations?
Sure, I can talk about it if you. Yeah, so if you're a family member who is concerned about a friend or a loved one or someone, to absolutely just reach out and talk to trained advocates. I mean, that's what advocates are here for. And so, because each case is very individual and different. And so it's really hard to say like a one size fits all, this is exactly what you should do approach. But I think it's really important for reach out to the resources that are available. Our advocates are there 24 hours a day in Tulsa and Oklahoma City. The state Safe Line is available for people. And so there are resources available. All of the certified programs are still providing services currently. And so reach out, talk to them. Is this behavior okay? They can help you come up with an individualized plan for ways that you could assist that loved one, and talk through what options may be available. Because I think a lot of times one of the biggest challenges is people just don't know that there's so much help out there. People just don't know. And so get those conversations started, letting that friend or family member or loved one know that you love them, that you support them, that you're here for them, that you're ready to listen whenever they're ready to talk. Just being that support system, and then reach out to those trained advocates.
Thank you, Angela. Another question is, as far as the follow-up for people that were kind of currently maybe midway through the process or getting started. Have you seen any drop off with that, like losing contact with some of your clients? And if so, how have you dealt with that, with the challenges of the social distancing?
I can speak to that a little bit. You know, since we're doing a lot of work remotely, most of our, you know, it varies client by client, but most of our clients have welcomed the connection with us. I think because people are feeling pretty isolated during this time. So we've been able to maintain most of our clients in terms of connectivity. Since we're not doing a lot of face-to-face interaction, it's mostly by phone or telehealth, Zoom, FaceTime. It kind of depends on what type of service we're providing. Of course, with confidentiality and those kind of concerns, we're for our telehealth mode of communication is DoxyMe. So that's what Divis is currently using, because we trust the confidential sort of parameters that are around that platform. But really, and same thing for our offender program is really just checking in with people, even though we're not face to face and having groups, just that checking in to make sure that that they're okay, they have basic needs met. Again, they can manage the stress of having kids home and out of school, and perhaps loss of employment, loss of job, loss of income, those kinds of things. So we've found that the reaching out people are pretty willing to still engage with us, particularly via telephone. Not everybody has access to computer and enough minutes to do a lot of talking and counseling services by phone, but we are able to maintain that connection and just checking on people's emotional and physical safety.
And I have another question. I know that you all noticed that the number of SOP protective orders have gone down, understandably, but do you feel that there is enough information about people that might be in an escalating situation? And how is the best way to get those resources, the information out to people so that they can perhaps get the help before it escalates to the violent, because we do know that it's a cycle. So what are the best resources or the best ways to kind of get that information out to people where they might be able to spot red flags? And I'm thinking about the fact that there's been such an unemployment spike, so that might be causing more tension in homes as well. So does anyone want to speak to how those situations are dealt with kind of unraveling the cycle and helping people recognize the red flags?
Sure, I can take that. Okay. I feel like we're all like, who's gonna take it? Who's gonna take it? Okay. Yeah, so recognizing the red flags and things like that. I feel like another way that you can do that is talking to an advocate. There's lots of information out there, like on our websites and things like that, about what things are okay and are not okay. I think in general we talk to people about any level of control that you're not comfortable with, because every couple is different, and you can't, so you can't say that every couple where a man controls the finances and a woman doesn't is abuse. Well, for some couples, that's how they want it to be. And so any level of control that you feel uncomfortable with is something that I would probably say, or any kind of situation where someone feels like they're being isolated from their loved ones, from friends and family members. And so there are kind of red flags that you can look out for. And those kinds of things are readily available online, on our websites. You can also, call and talk to an advocate, and they can help process through with you if those behaviors are okay or not. I think I do in some ways feel like this is a little bit of a quiet before the storm. I think typically it happens whenever people are away for like holiday weekends or things like that. The week after the holiday, it's crazy. And so I do really anticipate that there'll be a lot more people coming forward saying this is what's been happening in my home during quarantine as things start to open back up. Because we've also heard things like child abuse reports are down considerably. And so there's, a huge intersection between child abuse and domestic violence. A lot of the clients that we see, as Brandon talked about, are referred to us from those child welfare connections and partners. And so I think we are going to see a big influx of people as soon as they feel safe to be able to access services.
Yeah, and that's a point well taken. I do think that's the perfect way to describe it, that the quiet before the storm. I do think there is going to be an influx. Does anyone have any idea of how they're going to handle? I know that you mentioned that protective orders have been scheduled out as far as September or August, July. Is there going to be, does anyone know, and I'm sure everything's kind of still day by day, how those cases are going to be handled? Is it just going to be, do you know if there's going to be some way to prioritize them? And also, it's just kind of a follow-up question, are protective orders, I don't know if you have this information, are they being enforced? Like, are people calling them to have protective orders that are currently in place? Are they calling to even have them enforced at this time?
I think, Jacqueline, one of the things around protective orders right now, and I think Angela said maybe your dockets in Oklahoma City are pushed out till July. I know that ours are pushed out also. I think the important thing to know is that if somebody has received an emergency protective order during this time, that protective order is in effect. Once it's been, of course, served to the offending party, it is in effect for this entire time. So it is an order of protection so that survivors can and should call if that order is being violated during this time. So I think that partially speaks to your question. Again, I think in terms of the violations of protective orders that could be happening for those that have been in place or have been put in place during this time during the pandemic, if there's a violation, I mean, we would always advise people to report that to law enforcement. And there are ways to do that online. You don't have to call 911. You could call the non-emergency number, particularly if the person's violated it. But also there's a great way to do it in Tulsa online, and you can just go in and report those violations so that those become tracked in a person's case. So we would strongly encourage that to happen during this time if somebody does not want to call law enforcement out. Oftentimes by the time you call law enforcement, the offending party is no longer present, so they can't really do anything anyway. But it is important to report the violation and, of course, any witnesses to those violations.
Thank you for that, Tracy. Another question, I know that you have, and I know there's resources throughout the state, but for the rural communities at this time that might have a lack of access to strong internet services, how have your organizations been able to continue with the outreach to the rural areas? Has that been a challenge? And just how is that access being handled during this time, especially?
Jacqueline, sorry, I'm having more technical difficulties. A number of us work with the Oklahoma Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. So that's the coalition of all of the domestic violence programs in Oklahoma, both those that are certified by the Attorney General and some other like tribal programs are affiliated as well. And so all of the programs besides those in Oklahoma City or Tulsa, of course, are considered rural. And I think now's as good a time as any to point out that the Oklahoma State Safe Line, administered by the Attorney General under contract with us, that is a statewide hotline. And so even if people don't have the technology for telecommunication, the Safe Line is on and running 24/7. And each of those Attorney General certified programs across the state also have 24/7 hotlines in addition to the Safe Line. So at a minimum, there is somebody on the other end of the phone across the state. I just wanted to add that in. Thanks.
Yeah, I would echo that. So our state coalition and then also the Native Alliance Against Violence will cover all of Oklahoma. So you don't have to be Native to receive support from tribal programs as well. So thankfully, Oklahoma City and Divis, we do a lot of the urban work, and they are covering a lot of the really difficult rural work in Oklahoma.
I was going to say, I think we're kind of spoiled and lucky in Oklahoma City and Tulsa because our primary service areas are going to be Oklahoma County and Tulsa County. And so in those smaller counties, I mean, there are some programs that do fantastic work. Like what's the program that's up northwest that covers like 10 counties across 3
services.
You say what?
Northwest Domestic Crisis Services, Woodward, Alva, and Guyman.
Yes, 10 counties across 3 satellite sites. They are angels, and I have no idea how they do it. So yeah, bless them for the work that they do, because I think about how challenging it is for us with our fantastic internet and phones in Oklahoma City. So yeah.
Yeah, and at Divis, so we serve Tulsa County and Creek County, so we get like a bit of understanding of rural, and that's like, I mean, it's really difficult. The resources in Creek County are sparse, and so someone that I supervise goes out to Creek County a lot, and I mean, it's really, really difficult work. So I applaud everyone who does that kind of rural work, because yes, you're very spoiled.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Molly, I didn't mean to step on your comment there. In addition to that, for a long while now, Tulsa and Oklahoma City have both had family justice centers, Family Safety Center in Tulsa, Family Justice Center in OKC. But as time goes by, we're seeing more of those across the state as well. Canadian County is going to be up and running pretty quickly. Pottawatomie County, Shawnee has one. So those are also probably going to be more opportunities for services as time goes by.
Chris is giving a shout out for Shawnee, so that's why I'm.
There's a really awesome DV program out at Shawnee. Project Safe is an awesome program. So yeah.
I hope I didn't forget anybody, but there are more than just the two family safety centers. Now, of course, those incorporate the domestic violence services are provided by the Attorney General certified domestic violence programs in this area. I hope I didn't forget anybody, but I know we at least have those 4 now.
I think that's it.
That's great information to have, and thank you. This is why we wanted to have this, because I think this is the kind of information that needs to get out there, and people know that there are resources available to them, not just now, but at all times. And we want to make sure that we can do all we can to share that information with people. Those are all the questions that I have, unless any of our attendees want to submit any more questions. But I would love for our panelists to share anything, what has been maybe a challenge and one of these kind of not a major victory, but one of those things that has touched you, either during this pandemic or just during the course of your work. I know you all have emotional experiences all the time, but I know there's sometimes those situations that kind of are, I don't know, shift changers, soul changers, or something like that. So I would love for you all to go around it and maybe share some of those experiences. And like I said, have you kind of adapted to the COVID pandemic?
I think one of the things that's been maybe renewing for me has been kind of the, I guess, tenacity of our staff, and how committed our advocates and counselors have been to still want to provide services to the people that we serve. I mean, even people with major health challenges on our teams. I mean, we have lots of staff who are very immunocompromised. We have staff who've battled cancer in the last year, all kinds of major medical challenges, and how excited they've been to creatively look at the ways that we can meet clients' needs throughout this time. And that has been inspiring for me as a supervisor to see. So yeah, it warms my heart to think about how creative we've been able to be during this time, and the ways that, and even one of my clients said, as certain things have slowed down during this time, it's given her more of the opportunity to provide the kind of case management that she loves to provide. Since she's not doing groups, she has more time to do this other stuff. And so having those kinds of conversations and hearing how committed they are to really be there for victims during this time has been important for me.
Can I just second what Angela said, because that was so good I forgot what I was going to say. No, I mean, truly, I agree wholeheartedly. Just the tenacity and the commitment of people who want to do the work and are going to find a way to do the work, because it's not going anywhere.
I will echo that too as well. It is really inspiring to work with a team of people that are just leaning into the discomfort of all of it and still providing much needed services to families every single day, with kids at home and their own personal health challenges, et cetera. Just, I can't say it enough. They say that it's times like this where we all kind of realize what we're made of. And I think that's definitely been true. And couldn't be more honored to work where I work.
Well, I don't even want to go after that, because that was really beautiful and really should be the end. But I agree. I mean, I think that's been really inspiring, and it's been really wonderful to still be connected with each other. I feel lucky that we can still stay connected with Zoom and all of our other forms of technology. I also think it's been a really healing time for a lot of us to be able to slow down in our work a little bit. Yes, we have to be creative. Yes, we're still working incredibly hard, and it's taking some different forms of brain power to do that. But it's also requiring us to slow down and be more thoughtful. And I think that we all need to have those moments so that we can do this more sustainably in the future. So that's been a really good, I think, byproduct, if we can have good byproducts of this.
No, that was actually really good. I have to say the tenacity of advocates is what has been most impressive throughout all of this. People that are boots on the ground are just amazing and phenomenal, and all of you and your staff and all the work that you're doing. The reason why we felt it was so important to have this conversation now is for people to know that these resources are out here 24/7. There's no limit. There's a way for an advocate to get to you and to get help to you. And we just want to make sure that we lift that up and make sure that people don't feel alone during this time of isolation. So this webinar is being recorded, and we are going to add links with a copy of the webinar to the OCJR Facebook page so that people can access it afterwards. And, anytime any of you all feel like there's some resources that, we need to share, please don't hesitate, because we want to make sure that we catch people upstream and help them and help the victims, help the survivors, and continue to support this work in Oklahoma, because it is so important. From the bottom of my heart, the work that you all do is so good and so important. So thank you so much. I don't know, I was going to have a big closing thing. Chris usually has a great closing. I don't know, it's hard to follow the group that we have. That Chris Steele, would you like to close out the webinar for us? Or?
Sure. I just would like to take a few minutes to talk a little more about Shawnee. And I want you to know that we are very interested. Like it is critical. The work that you do, the services that you provide, the expertise that you possess is it could not be more important to the state of Oklahoma. I just want to say thank you first and foremost. And I also want to reiterate that we are extremely interested as a coalition and as individuals who are interested in addressing issues of trauma, mental illness, addiction, whatever may be driving antisocial behavior. We're interested in addressing those issues effectively, but we are fully committed to working with you to advocate in a way that ensures that you all have the resources necessary to do the job that you have determined to do. I can think of no higher calling, and I just want to say thank you for it. My mom, on a personal note, Angela, I would tell you that my mom is we're from Shawnee, and she is on the advisory board of Project Safe and super duper involved there. And we not only, my wife and I, not only continuously think about and pray for participants who are in need of the services you provide, we also think of and keep you guys lifted in our thoughts as well. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all again so much. Thank you to all the attendees. Thank you to our panelists. From the bottom of my heart, you all, the work that you do is amazing. So thank you for taking the time. Thank you for sharing the resources. And we'll see you all next week, the Conversations with OCJR. And please look for the posting of the webinar on our Facebook page. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.